The National Footprint and Biocapacity accounts remind us that we're all part of one planet Earth and that our actions have rippling impacts. The most up-to-date data accounts can be found on the Global Footprint Network's website. Have fun exploring the data or use it to tell an interesting story. In whatever work you do, tag us on Twitter at EFI_YorkU. We would love to see how you use the data. In this second of a three-part series showcasing the launch of the 2022 accounts, you'll be inspired by the words of Severn Cullis-Suzuki.
Another change maker who might not need a big introduction from me, but I will do that anyway. It's our guest of honor today, our keynote speaker, Severn Cullis-Suzuki, who has been an activist for intergenerational justice her whole life. As a child, she started the environmental children's organization with friends, culminating in a 5-minute speech to the UN Earth Summit in 1992, when she was 12 years old. Severn has continued to advocate for future generations, speaking extensively about our current generation's legacy and about returning to our deepest human values and human scales. She is proud of her work on the Earth Charter Commission, on the David Suzuki Foundation Board, and the Haida Gwaii Higher Education Society Founding Board. Severn holds a BSc in evolutionary biology from Yale University, an MSc from ethnoecology from the University of Victoria, and she's currently pursuing her PhD at the University of British Columbia, where she's a Vanier Scholar studying endangered language revitalization. She also serves as the Executive Director of the David Suzuki Foundation. Please join me in welcoming Severn Cullis-Suzuki.
Thank you very much, Dean Alice, and thank you very much, everyone, for your wonderful presentations on this fantastic work. I'm truly honored to be here today and to be speaking at the release of the 2022 edition of the National Footprints Accounts. So I wanted to begin by saying hello, my fellow humans. I see in the chat there's people from all over the planet. And I think that it's wonderful that we've all come together to look at this reality that's reflected in the footprint accounts that really, I think, is a unifying aspect of being human at this time on this planet. And this is significant because right now the pull to divide us is strong. So it's very important that we all remember and affirm this common identity and what we share among us. And at the foundational level, we are all human beings. We are animals on planet Earth who require clean air to breathe, clean water to drink, and healthy soil and food to sustain us. That is our core base identity. And the National Footprint Accounts reveals the shared math of our collective future. I'm speaking to you today from the homelands of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh peoples who've been here for thousands of years. I've just moved here last summer, and I'm amazed by the beauty of southern British Columbia here on the west coast of Canada. I reflect daily on thinking about how the humans here ran their economies so that these lands and waters were sustainably managed for millennia. It was not a fluke. It was by cultural design that people did not take too much and always stewarded an economy oriented to the future. As I said, we are gathered here at a very special time. Like all other moments in history, this one is unique. Today, one of the aspects of this historical moment is that we are 50 years after the Club of Rome produced their report called The Limits to Growth. The MIT team used computer modeling to explore exponential growth in a finite world. They modeled 6 different scenarios. To avoid collapse, the authors called for an orderly transition from growth to equilibrium and said, we suspect on the basis of present knowledge of the physical constraints of the planet that the growth phase cannot continue for another 100 years. If society waits until those constraints are unmistakably apparent, it will have waited too long. At the time, 50 years ago, and for decades after, that report was rejected. Economists rallied to undermine the limits to growth credibility and to argue that ecological limits were irrelevant. However, many decades later, more recent assessments suggest the model performed remarkably well to what is actually occurring today. We lost several decades in which the methods and the results of the limits to growth were pushed outside of the boundaries of political correctness and of scientifically sound ideas, as well as off the political and world stage. However, as being reflected in Limits to Growth Revisited, the influence of the report lives on in the field of ecological economics, planetary boundary framework, and the modeling of complex systems. We've created some powerful tools in the last 50 years. These tools are key for us to navigate the challenging path forward. The National Footprints accounts are a crucial tool for showing and analyzing our consumption of resources. We depend on science and data to provide us with baselines so that we can accurately and appropriately build out our solutions. And this is the foundation upon which our solutions must be developed. And this is what your work represents. The evidence is stark. These accounts show that we have been in global overshoot since the 1970s. And our science and tools can measure what is critical to shift. So these accounts show us what is happening. Now we need to act on this evidence. We need to engage in social change. We must socialize something new. And this requires changing beliefs and profound assumptions. And it is striking how much we still need to do this. Last week, I was speaking at a UN event for the Global Biodiversity Framework. And in response to a question before passing the mic over to me, online, of course, the moderator said, without a second thought, transitioning, she said, but we must have economic growth, and then just put it to me. And I just was so, it just reminded me of how prevalent this idea is, this concept that we must continue to grow and grow, even as our ecological reality is so clearly showing us that this is not possible. We need to shift the public narrative. This is a huge task and will require all of us doing what we can with the influence that we have to influence public will. For me personally, this has meant trying to do everything I can as an activist, as an organizer, as a student, and working with the David Suzuki Foundation. But this special moment has significant opportunities for transformation. We're 2 years into the pandemic, and I think that there is now a huge opportunity to shift the public narrative. COVID has reminded us of some profound truths that we were able to ignore for the past 50 years. COVID has reminded us that nature is the true bottom line, that science and data are crucial to our survival, that we are all interconnected. We're interconnected. What happens in Wuhan or London or Texas or Canada, these things are so interconnected around a globalized planet. And what we do in one household to the next is totally interconnected. And finally, one of the most important lessons I believe COVID has reminded us of is that what each of us do, our own actions, have ramifications, whether or not we choose to get vaccinated, whether or not we wear a mask or wash our hands. These things that we do as individuals have huge impacts, for better or for worse. During the pandemic, under lockdown, separated from our community and families, we've changed. We've realized our vulnerability. Many of us have lost loved ones. We've paid attention to violence against Black lives. We have found the remains of thousands of children in unmarked graves besides old residential schools here in Canada. We've realized that systemic racism is here and it's unacceptable, and that equity must be an essential goal of all our work and institutions, and that we all must fight for it. We've also watched as climate change has settled in. I'm speaking to you from the province of British Columbia, which over the last year has experienced fires, heat domes, floods, and states of emergency. And we've recognized over these past 2 years that well-being as a concept is extremely significant and important. We've realized the fragility of our own well-being. It has already becoming an indicator of organizational health in the time of the Great Resignation. Well-being, perhaps its time has come. And so part of the work that this David Suzuki Foundation has been doing over the past 2 years has been looking at this concept of well-being and its relationship to a potential new economy. For the past 2 years, DSF, the David Suzuki Foundation, has been supporting a network of interested citizens on the concept of a well-being economy in Canada. And this is participating in an international discussion that is growing even in governments like Scotland and New Zealand. The Wellbeing Economy Alliance is built on the desire to build an economy based on well-being of people and ecosystems. This started out of many local and global conversations and an alliance of individuals, organizations, and networks to catalyze an economy based on well-being, not simply on economic growth. And this network has outlined a theory of change. One of the barriers they identify to this transformation and to using well-being as an indicator of societal health is the concentration of political and financial power. And so to address this, spaces must be created for convening a diversity of stakeholders to build a new base of power to create change. DSF began a project with many others to convene a We All hub in Canada and to hold dialogues about what a well-being economy could look like. And this year, we are going to be launching the Northern Woods Dialogue Series this year. And this Northern Woods is a play on the concept, on the name of the Bretton Woods that was held after the Second World War to set up the current economic paradigm. These are steps to socialize a way of addressing what the footprint tools are telling us. We need to make this framework accessible to the general public. At this time when so many problems are becoming the norm of what we hear about, we need to increase people's literacy about what the solutions are. Just like we did with COVID. We heard all the time about the problems and what was happening with COVID, but also news broadcasters were constantly reminding us to wash our hands, wear masks, and taught people about things as complex as viral loads and different vaccine technologies. So we need to make sure that we're communicating and transplanting the data and translating the data and the science to the public to make transformative change at a deep human level, because that's what it's going to take. Story for humans, it's essential. Today, in the current context, equity and colonization concepts carry a lot more weight. People are growing their literacy on these concepts and what they have meant for human society. And at that same UN event, the representative that I was speaking at, the representative from Kenya asked, who is it that carries the responsibility to make the changes? In my country, most of my people are living on under $1 a day. And in my mind, this aspect of equity, of who has the responsibility for making change. This is an important story that the National Footprints accounts tells. It's a story about equity and where the responsibility lies when it comes to who is eating up the earth and who must take action to halt that consumption. The David Suzuki Foundation is hoping to play a role here, along with many others. We want to help co-create and share the meaningful story that tools like the footprint accounts are telling in a manner to help society reimagine and rewrite the underlying narratives, beliefs, assumptions that have led to the need for tools like the footprint in the first place. Our resilience will depend on how society can be helped to let go of our old thinking and those old ways to allow new thinking and new ways to get rooted and sprout. In conclusion, we are living in a different world today than a few years ago. Everything feels more extreme, more urgent. Climate change, a war in Ukraine, the link between violence and climate change and fossil fuels are becoming clearer than ever. But change is not only possible, it's happening. In 2019, if you had told me that governments of the world would work across party lines, would move billions of dollars, would listen to science to find solutions to an existential crisis, and that all of us would radically transform how we live, if you told me that in 2019, I would not have believed you. And yet here we are. We have just proved to ourselves that we can do the impossible. It is my hope that today we have internalized these important lessons that COVID has taught us, so that now the tools and solutions we are building have a new resonance and power. Thank you very much.